Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It's time for the Week 18 injury update show. Sadly, the last injury update show of this NFL and fantasy season. Hopefully, you've already played your fantasy championships and you're just hanging out with me because you enjoy when I talk about injuries. But if you do have a fantasy championship this week, this episode is going to be very, very important. I'm going to try to break down each and every game where I think players are going to miss either because of injury or because the team is sitting them on purpose. I'm going to try to include as many guys as I can so that this video can really help you understand who is or is not likely to play this week due to injury or playoff circumstances. I'm going to do my best to try to explain that all to you, but we got a lot of stuff to break down in this video, so let's jump into it. All right, before we get into the games this week, I'm not going to have a moment of silence because obviously everyone who misses this week is going to be missing the rest of the fantasy season, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But what I did want to spend some time on is some transparency from me to you guys on some statistics that I keep track of myself for the season. I'm going to count the fantasy seasons as week 1 through 17. I'm not going to talk about this week because we don't know what's going to happen this week yet, but I did want to talk about how I did this year on the injury show very briefly. We did over 800 individual player injury updates here on the channel this season from weeks 1 to 17, averaging 47 players in each week's video. That is a ton of injury updates. I was 92% accurate on my in-out calls / predictions this year. My best season so far with the fantasy headliners. Usually I hover around 89, 90%. This year, 92% from weeks 1 to 17. My worst week this year was week 1, actually 75% accurate in week 1. Really sorry I didn't get us off to the right foot, but my best weeks were pretty solid. Weeks 11 and 12, I was at 98% on my predictions for in-out calls those weeks, so pretty proud of that. And then on average, if you looked at the players that I projected to miss games that actually ended up playing, they only averaged 8.4 PPR points in the games that they played. If I thought they were going to miss the game and they ended up playing, you were better off sitting them the majority of the time. So just another little fun fact for this week this year, basically in review. But again, want to thank everybody that hung out with me each and every week this season. Really enjoyed doing these injury updates. This is year 4, easily the best year that we've had in terms of viewership, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel. So again, want to thank you from the doc. Myself personally want to thank you guys for watching these shows. I can't count this as a very successful year, but if you didn't think I was successful, let me know in the comments. I'm sure that I will appreciate all the hate mail down below. But I know you guys aren't here to hear me talk about myself. You want to hear about the games this week. So we're going to start with the Saturday games and we're just going to get right into it. All right, 2 Saturday games to talk about. No Thursday night football, so we're jumping right into these Saturday games. First up, we got Steelers at the Ravens. Steelers need to get a win to get into the playoffs. If they lose, they're out. Not a lot of complicated scenarios with this. The Steelers need to win if they want to make the playoffs. Ravens obviously already in the playoffs. Steelers quarterback Kenny Pickett, dealing with that ankle sprain, is back practicing in full, but is not expected to start this week. Mason Rudolph will continue to be the starter in this must-win game. And then safety Minkah Fitzpatrick, dealing with that knee injury, is back practicing in a limited capacity. With this being a game they have to win, I would bet that they are going to be able to play him in this game, but because the game's on Saturday, I'm going to say he's a game time decision, but he is trending in the right direction. As for the Ravens, quarterback Lamar Jackson, wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. have both officially been ruled out, not due to injury, but because the team is opting to sit them because they're already in the playoffs and they can't really change their playoff seeding, so it doesn't matter if they win this game or not. But just know those two guys have already been ruled out. They are expected to sit more starters. The one guy I'm the most concerned about is wide receiver Zay Flowers. He's dealing with a calf strain, hasn't been practicing at all this week. Unlikely that he plays given the team situation. But again, technically, this is a change to his normal practice schedule over the last couple weeks. He's been dealing with this calf injury. So again, even if it's planned rest for him for the playoffs, I would not expect that we see Zay Flowers in this game either. Moving on to the Texans at the Colts. Simple game here. Whoever wins this game is getting into the playoffs. Texans wide receiver Noah Brown already been ruled out with a back injury. Defensive end Jonathan Greenard also already been ruled out with an ankle injury, but defensive end Will Anderson Jr. was able to come back last week and is still limited in practice, but I would expect him to play in this must-win game. As for the Colts, they are actually pretty healthy for this game, so it should be a must-watch game if you are just a fan of football. It should be a really good game. Moving on to the early Sunday games, we got Buccaneers at the Panthers. Bucs are needing a win to make it to the playoffs, but if they don't win, they are out. As for their players, quarterback Baker Mayfield dealing with a rib injury, didn't practice Wednesday, limited Thursday. He's missing time in practice, but has vowed that he will play in this game. He's just got soreness in his ribs, took a shot last week. As for the Panthers, they don't really have any injuries to talk about, but again, don't have a lot of incentive to win or lose this game. So they're going to probably play their starters. If you're playing any starters in fantasy for them, you're pretty much good to go. Moving on to the Browns at the Bengals. Browns have clinched the 5 spot, are expected to rest their starters. They've already declared that Joe Flacco is going to be resting. He's not going to play for sure. I would assume that Amari Cooper dealing with this heel injury, missing week 17, he's unlikely to play as well. We'll see what happens with David Njoku, but don't expect him or the running backs to get a lot of run in this game if they're active. As for the Bengals, they're already ruled out of the playoffs, but wide receiver T. Higgins dealing with the hamstring strain, left, but did manage to return last week. He's a game time decision despite him not practicing. Because they're not really playing for anything, I wouldn't be surprised if they sat him though. Wide receiver Jamar Chase has said he is expecting to play in this game. He's coming off that AC sprain, but back practicing in full on Thursday. I'm kind of tentative on if I'm playing him or not. I probably am, just because somebody has to play wide receiver for the Bengals this week. And again, the team is playing basically to get a winning record. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to keep their starters in for this game, even though it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And the running back Joe Mixon does have an illness. Didn't practice Thursday, but he should still be able to play. Now we get into a complicated playoff scenario. We got Vikings at the Lions. Vikings need a win, but also need wins from Chicago, Arizona, and Atlanta or Carolina to get in. The Lions have already locked in a playoff spot and are playing for seeding, so there is some incentive for them to play, but I do expect them to rest their starters at some point in this game. Vikings don't really have any injuries to talk about, but for the Lions, wide receiver Jamison Williams dealing with an ankle sprain, not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to be able to play. Tight end Sam Laporta dealing with an ankle sprain as well, limited so far this week, put up another solid game last week, but this ankle injury is slowing him down a little bit in practice. The team could opt to take it the safe route and not play him at all, but he's at least on track to play. I'm going to say he's a game time decision because, again, don't know exactly what the Lions are planning. They've said they're not resting their starters, but I'll believe that when I see it. Moving on to the Jets at the Patriots. This game has no playoff implications. They're just playing for draft positions. Jets quarterback Zach Wilson not expected to play in this game due to a concussion, not practicing at all this week. Trevor Siemian going to get the starting spot here in Week 18. As for the Patriots, tight end Hunter Henry dealing with a knee injury, limited in practices so far this week. Missed the last 2 games, but is at least pacing towards playing this week. Might be worth picking up if you're going to be down a starting tight end. A lot of starting tight ends not expected to play a lot this week. Hunter Henry could be a guy you could slot in if he does manage to play. And then wide receiver Devontae Parker dealing with rib injury, left the game last week, was one of Bailey Zappi's favorite targets while he was the starter. But he is practicing this week, even though he didn't come back in last week's game. X-rays were negative, so there's still a good chance that Devontae Parker could play this week. Moving on to the the Falcons at the Saints. Both teams need to win this game, and they both need Tampa Bay to lose to win the NFC South. But the Saints have another way in if they win and both Seattle and Green Bay lose. So both these guys are playing. Should expect them to play all of their starters with a chance at the playoffs. Both of these teams needing a win. Falcons quarterback Taylor Heineke dealing with that ankle sprain. Limited practices so far this week. Was hurt last week. Ultimately played and started. I would expect him to play again and start this week. At least that is what the rumor is right now. They could potentially go with a quarterback change again, but I'm not really expecting that. As for the Saints, running back Alvin Kamara dealing with an ankle sprain. Based on video, look like a high ankle sprain to me. I think it's a long shot that he plays in this game, despite it being a must-win game. So don't expect to have Alvin Kamara this week. Tight end Juwan Johnson dealing with a chest injury, limited on Thursday. He's been banged up all year, but has started the last 6 games. I'd expect him to play through this issue as well. And then wide receiver Chris Olave dealing with an ankle sprain. Limited practices so far this week. He said the ankle was still bothering him after missing week 15. Played the last 2 games, pretty mixed results. A good game and a bad game. He's probably a must start if you've got him and you're hoping for the best, despite the fact that he is still banged up with the ankle injury. Don't be surprised if he lays another dud, but also wouldn't be surprised if he has a monster game. He's just kind of going to be one of those guys this week. And then last early Sunday game, Jaguars at the Titans. Jaguars win. They get in, but they can also get in if Pittsburgh and Denver lose, assuming that the Colts and Texans game doesn't end in a tie. So basically, the Jags need to win this game. They are projected to win this game, but they got quarterback Trevor Lawrence coming back from the right shoulder / left finger issues that he's got going on. He's been limited in practice this week, missed his first NFL start last week, couldn't shake the shoulder injury. The team is reeling a bit. They're not playing very well, but again, the Titans not exactly a team you're very concerned about from a competitive standpoint. And the good news is that Zay Jones, wide receiver who's missed the last month or so with a hamstring and knee issue, is practicing again. Trevor Lawrence plays a lot better when he has Zay Jones out there. It looks like Zay Jones is going to be able to make this game, so we'll see if that gives a little bit of a boost to this Jags offense that's really been not very impressive over the last 3 or 4 weeks. As for the Titans, quarterback Will Levis has a foot injury. Didn't practice on Wednesday, limited Thursday. The x-rays came back negative, but I'd say it's still a long shot that he plays in this game. Doesn't really mean a whole lot for the Titans if they win or lose this game. They actually probably prefer to lose it. And again, Ryan Tannehill would step in and be the starter for Will Levis if he is not able to go. All right, guys, moving into the midday slate on Sunday, we got Seahawks at the Cardinals. Seahawks are in with a win and a Green Bay loss or tie. They're only really worried about Kenneth Walker dealing with the shoulder sprain, limited on Thursday. Played decently well last week, despite him clearly splitting work with Zach Charbonnet. I don't know if he's really a great start against the Cardinals, but he's at least worth a start given the fact that a lot of teams are not going to be playing their starters, and Kenneth Walker is going to get a lot of run against this Cardinals defense. He's banged up, but again, Kenneth Walker should play in this game. As for the Cardinals, no real major injury news. They did finally put Marquise Brown on injured reserve last Friday, so that was after I recorded the injury video. But again, he's done for the year. Cardinals don't have any reason to try to win this game, so expect the Seahawks to most likely make the playoffs. Next up, we got Bears at the Packers. A good rivalry game with a lot of implications for the playoffs. Packers win and they are in, or they need the Vikings and either the Bucs or the Saints to lose to make it into the playoffs. As for the Bears, they got tight end Cole Kmet dealing with that knee sprain. Didn't practice on Wednesday, limited Thursday. Got his first practice in since week 16. Given the lack of clarity on what this injury actually is, I'm not totally convinced that he's going to be able to play. He's going to be a game-time decision for me. Wide receiver DJ Moore dealing with an ankle sprain. He should play, but no, he's a little hurt. Wide receiver Darnell Mooney dealing with a concussion, still not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to make it back for this game. And then running back Khalil Herbert has a back injury that showed up, not listed at all, and then showed up on Thursday with this back issue. They're calling it a little bit of tightness. He isn't expected to not play, and I feel like, given the fact that he is playing incredibly well, we should be talking more about the fact that Khalil Herbert is technically the RB5 over the last 2 weeks in the fantasy playoffs. Khalil Herbert, kind of one of those sneaky guys that if you were starting him, you got big returns from him. As for the Packers, they got all sorts of injuries on the offensive side of the ball. Again, wide receiver Christian Watson, at least, is back practicing, limited this week. It's been about a month since we've seen Christian Watson play for the Packers, but at least he's practicing. I think he's going to try to give it a go, given that they need to win this game. Wide receiver Jaden Reed dealing with the chest injury, limited so far this week, but he keeps getting pulled from games due to chest injuries. I'm not sure if it's the same injury that's just bothering him over and over again. Not sure if it's just because they picked up a big lead, so they pulled him out because of it. All I know is he's probably going to play. I think they're just protecting him, but we'll see if Christian Watson showing up affects Jaden Reed's ability to put up a good fantasy day. Tight end Luke Musgrave dealing with that lacerated kidney, limited again this week. Still practicing, but has not played yet. He wants to play. He's going to be a game time decision this week. Maybe a guy you could pick up for free if he's still hanging around on waivers because he hasn't played in about 6 weeks. If he's playing, I don't mind him as a start against a not very great Bears defense against tight ends. So I don't hate it if you need a streamer at tight end and he's around. Running back Aaron Jones dealing with knee and finger issues, still limited in practice, but it doesn't look like this is anything new that's popped up. He should play, but A.J. Dillon does have a new issue. He has the broken thumb, but now he's dealing with a neck injury, not practicing this week, left last week's game. I'd be surprised if we see A.J. Dillon in this game. Aaron Jones, a locked-in starter for your fantasy teams this week. Moving on to the Chiefs at the Chargers. Should have been a great game, but doesn't really look like it's going to turn out to be very much of a contest really here. The Chiefs have already said that they expect to sit multiple starters in this game. They got a lot of guys that are banged up too. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce is dealing with a neck injury. Patrick Mahomes isn't hurt, but he's not going to play in this game. Blaine Gabbert's going to start. Travis Kelce does have a neck issue, but he needs just 16 more yards to break 1,000 for the 8th straight season. I wouldn't be surprised to see him play maybe in the first quarter and then get pulled out once he hits that 1,000-yard mark. Could be as soon as the first drive if they really target him a bunch. I do think they're going to let him play, though, in this game. Don't be tricked by that. He's not going to be in for a long time. He's going to be in basically just until he hits that 1,000-yard mark for the season. Wide receiver Rashee Rice, dealing with the hamstring injury, not practicing. Don't expect him to suit up at all. Probably wouldn't have played in this game even if they needed him to. And then Isaiah Pacheco dealing with quad and shoulder issues. Another starter likely sitting, but is dealing with true injuries, so he needs the rest. I don't expect him to play a ton. If he plays, that could be a trap for your fantasy teams as well. As for the Chargers, kind of the same deal. A lot of starters unlikely to suit up again for the Chargers, but it's the names that you would expect. Keenan Allen not going to play in this game. Joey Bosa, Kenneth Murray, all expected to miss this game. Some of those injuries I think are legit. Some of them I think are just because the Chargers have no incentive to win this game. Moving on to the Broncos at the Raiders. Both teams are already eliminated from the playoffs. I don't really know why you would watch this game unless you really want to see if the Broncos can, salvage an above 500 season. Broncos wide receiver Cortland Sutton should come back for this game, getting full practice in on Thursday, dealing with that concussion. Should be able to play. As for the Raiders, Josh Jacobs, he's not playing in this game due to a quad strain. And then Michael Mayer has the turf toe issue. He's not going to be playing either. The Raiders do need a quarterback. Maybe they can compete next year if they keep losing. So I would expect the Broncos to win this game pretty easily because at least they're playing for some pride. Moving on to the Eagles at the Giants. Eagles have a playoff berth locked up, but need to win and the Cowboys to lose to avoid a wild card game and to win the NFC East. So I'm not going to say that the Eagles are going to stop starting their starters, but just know another situation where if the game gets out of hand quickly, they could pull all their guys. But wide receiver Devontae Smith has an ankle issue. He got rolled up on during a play and kind of limped off. Didn't look like he was very comfortable when he limped off, not practicing. I would not expect him to play in this game. As for the Giants, they're pretty healthy, but they're not very good. Moving on to the Rams at the 49ers, a true backup bowl in this game. Both teams already clinching playoff spots. Can't really do a whole lot as far as movement goes. Rams don't really have any major injuries to talk about, but they've already ruled out Matthew Stafford, Kyren Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Tyler Higbee. So don't expect really to play any of your Rams starters. Might be looking at their backups if you're looking for a guy to stream this week. As for the 49ers, they're also expected to sit most of their key starters, but Christian McCaffrey did pick up a calf injury. He said it was minor. He's not been practicing this week. They already said that they're going to sit him, but this is an actual injury. Might be worth noting if you're talking about placing some bets during the playoffs. Just know Christian McCaffrey is a little banged up. And then last game of the midday slate on Sunday, we got Cowboys at the Commanders. Cowboys are in regardless of if they win or not, but seeding could play a factor as to how long their starters play. They do need a win, like I said, to make sure that they clinch the NFC East and the number 2 seed so they get a home playoff game. So I have a feeling that they're going to try to win this game, probably keeping their starters in for the first half, maybe 3 quarters. That might be enough to justify keeping their starters in, assuming that we don't get any news, which I haven't heard anything yet as of this recording, that they're going to sit any of their guys. But assuming they're not sitting them, probably expecting 2 to 3 quarters worth of production. No real injuries to talk about, and again, don't really know if they're resting those starters. As for the Commanders, they don't have a whole lot to play for, but wide receiver Curtis Samuel, dealing with a hamstring strain, didn't practice on Thursday after getting a full workout in on Wednesday. I think this is just rest. I couldn't find anything about him actually having an injury outside of them reporting it on the injury report. I think it's planned rest for Samuel. I would expect him to play, and they're expecting Sam Howell to be the starter, so I guess you could stream Curtis Samuel or Sam Howell. I don't see any reason why the Commanders wouldn't be trying to at least be competitive in this game, but just know Curtis Samuel could potentially be hurt, but he's probably not. Last game of the week, another game with a lot of playoff implications. This was the most playoff contending teams in Week 18 that we've ever had. So a lot of teams still trying to move around. We don't know really at all what's going to happen with these playoffs. We only have a few teams locked into certain spots. So a lot of matchups could happen after this week. But we got Bills at the Dolphins. This game is a total crapshoot. The Bills are in if they win. But if the Steelers or the Jaguars lose, or if the Texans and Colts game ends in a tie, they also get in. So there's a good chance the Bills are making the playoffs, but if the Steelers win, the Jaguars win, there's still a chance, I guess, that the Bills lose this game. There's still a chance that they could miss the playoffs. Luckily, 2 of those games happen on Saturday, so they should know whether or not they absolutely must win this game or not. That's going to be key for paying attention to if you're starting anyone for the Bills. They don't have a lot of injuries to talk about, but if they're already locked into a playoff spot, they are going to be a lot more likely to sit their starters against the Dolphins. The Dolphins are limping into the playoffs, though. Linebacker Bradley Chubb, torn ACL, done for the year. I'd argue that this was probably an avoidable injury given the situation that the Dolphins were in when it happened, down big to the Ravens last week. Didn't need their starters out there. But again, you can't just pull all your starters. There's only 46 active players each and every week. I know the common sense argument would be, why is Bradley Chubb playing in this game? I'd probably argue that. But again, torn ACL for Bradley Chubb. It's a lesson for anybody that's demanding their team start all their stud players each and every week. Injuries don't care about your timing. They don't care about what the game situation looks like. They just happen. So really tough break for Bradley Chubb, really tough break for the Dolphins because they also lost Xavier Howard with a foot injury. X-rays came back negative, doesn't need surgery, but is expected to miss multiple weeks with this foot sprain. So the defense really banged up for the Dolphins. As for the offensive side of the ball, running back Raheem Mostert has knee and ankle issues, not practicing again this week after being arguably the best fantasy pick that you could make in 2023. Mostert will likely miss another championship week. Missed week 17, probably going to miss this week as well. Really a bummer for anybody who benefited from him playing out of his mind all season. But again, we appreciate these guys, what they put their bodies through for our fantasy teams, and hopefully he got you to a chip and then you were able to win it without him last week or this week, assuming you're playing in your fantasy championships this week, which I would hope everyone watching this is, because it's not really the most thrilling video if you're not still playing fantasy football. But last guy to talk about, last guy of the season to talk about, wide receiver Jalen Waddle dealing with an ankle sprain, tweaked his ankle a couple weeks ago. I doubt we see him in this game. Hopefully he will be back for the first round of the playoffs though. But that's it, guys. The last injury update of the 2023-2024 fantasy season is in the books. All right, guys, that's it for the Week 18 injury update show. I am a little sad. It's our last injury show of the 2023-2024 season. But I appreciate you guys coming here each and every week, and I appreciate you supporting our sponsors. Make sure you head over to Manscaped, use the code Headliners, get 20% off plus free shipping. When you use that code Headliners, go to pristineauction.com. Sign up for a free account. Using the code Headliners, you get a free account. You also get entered to win our swag giveaways that Pristine Auction is sending Jake all sorts of swag. Make sure that you're signed up using that code Headliners. And if you want to play fantasy football in the postseason, the best place to do it is going to be Underdog Fantasy. Use the code Headliners when you sign up. Get a $100 first deposit match over at Underdog Fantasy. But that's it, guys. That's all I got for you this season. We got a ton of fire content coming this offseason. So make sure, if you haven't already, like this video, but also subscribe to the channel, because we are putting out content each and every week in the offseason. You got to make sure that we're getting better at fantasy in the offseason with the Headliners. And we got a lot of good content coming your way this offseason. And I'm just going to tell you straight up, I think that this is going to be the best offseason for getting better at fantasy football that we are going to have here at the channel. And if you want to be a part of the exclusive Headliner Nation this offseason, please join down below. If you join, become a member of Headliner Nation, you get access to our Discord. That thing is running all off season. We're getting better. We're answering questions. We do a lot of exclusive stuff in the off season, exclusive Zoom calls with Jake, Kyle, me, Mac, Taylor. Everybody gets involved in those Zoom calls. You want to be a part of those. It's the best place to get to know us. It's the best place to have access to us. So hit that join button, become an exclusive member. But guys, that's it. That's all I got for you this year. I hope you win your fantasy championships. That shouldn't be being played in week 18, but here we are anyway. But I hope you guys win nonetheless. And the doc is out.